Okay, hi guys, it's Jason here again. In this video, I want to just briefly explain, churches in the United States, they have tax-free status, which means that they're exempt from paying property taxes and income taxes. Okay, so when you make a donation to a church in the United States, like let's say you give $5, the church does not have to treat that $5 as income and pay taxes on it. Okay, the same thing goes for their property. They have land, and let's say if that land was owned by a company, the corporation, let's say that operated on that land, they would have to pay taxes every year, property taxes, based on the value of that property. But a church on that same property, operating on the same property, they don't have to pay property tax. So now the exemption. Now, for those of you who don't live in the United States, our tax authority is called the Internal Revenue Service. And the Internal Revenue Service, this law that exempts, it's not only churches but all religious institutions, from income and property tax. The law that designates that exemption is called the 501c3. Okay, so that's just a number in the code. That's the code number for that law that you can look it up. Now, that code number, as is typical, Freemasonry is a religion where they communicate by symbols, and numbers and letters are symbols. And of course, Freemasonry is satanic, and it's sort of an inside joke to them. Just like the book of Revelation says, the number of the Antichrist is 666, and so many things in the United States, you'll find it equals 666. For example, Apple Computer, when they sold their first computer, it was reported to have been, the price was $666.66, something like that. So, that's how America is. You look at a lot of things in America and you'll be able to find 666 in it. And it's not an accident. And of course, most people don't notice. They're not meant to notice. It's sort of the Freemasons, it's an inside joke for them. So this 501, to get to the point, the 501c3 equals 666. Okay, so I'm going to show you here on this paper. Okay, so here is how the IRS code is written. This is how it's written in the IRS code, 501c3. Okay, now how does that equal 666? 5 plus 0 plus 1 equals 6. And one thing about Freemasonry is they like to, it has double meaning. Like the letter C is the same exact sound as I see something. Like I see a bird. So it's the same, even though they've disguised it as a letter C, it has in this hidden code, they're meaning see, like you see it, you see something. Okay, so here, what do we see? So we see 501, that's 5 plus 0 plus 1 equals 6, and we see 3 as in 3 of them. We see three of what? 3 sixes. So here is, so when we put it all together, 5 plus 0 plus 1 equals 6, and you see 3. 666. So I don't want to carry on anymore, you get it. Sometimes I, obviously I'm known for carrying on too long. So now, interestingly, if you really want to silence, you want to silence a a pastor of a church, okay? This is all you have to say to them. Okay, so ordinarily a pastor or some worker in the church will try to get you to come to their church, and they will talk to you and try to get you, come on, oh, come to our church. We invite you to our church, and you know, they'll go overboard to invite you, right? To attend their church. Okay? And all you have to do, interestingly, all you have to do to turn them against you, and you will see them literally just like avoid you like the plague. All you have to do is ask one question. Is this church a 501c3? Okay, the moment you ask that question, they will treat you like you're the devil himself, and they will avoid you like the plague. Now you are no longer invited to their church. They want nothing to do with you. And all you're asking is, are you a 501c3 organization? And they will not answer you. Okay? And I have, emailed churches as well. Like, you can email them and say, because I want to know, don't I have a right to ask? Yeah. So you can send them an email. Are you a 501? That's all. You don't have to argue. You're just asking them. Are you a 501c3 church? You will never hear from them. Okay, if you ask them what time is your service and blah blah blah, oh sure, they'll email you back. But if you ask them just that, you just say, are you a 501c3? They will not answer you back. They know exactly what you're implying. If that is just simply an IRS designation, then why would they be so touchy about it? Okay? Why would they be so touchy about it? And now, just real quickly, I just want to add, if you look in Luke chapter 20, Luke chapter 20, pause this and get your Bible. Luke chapter 20, verse 22. And he says, now just to be clear, this is sort of taking the verse, I admit, this is sort of taking the verse out of context. This is really not what the verse is about. However, it just does make the point that, because to be clear, I'm talking to my sheep. I speak sheep. So there are conditions for having that designation, and the 501c3, the government has conditions and all that. And what's interesting as well is, well, never mind. But anyway, Luke chapter 20, verse 22, the Pharisees tried to catch Joshua in tried to get him to say something that would be considered anti-government. So they, trying to get him in trouble with the government. So they asked him in verse 22, is it lawful for us to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Okay? So I guess they were expecting him to say that it's not lawful. In other words, law meaning according to Leviticus, the laws of Moses. I guess they were trying to get Joshua to say that it's not, it goes against the laws, the Mosaic laws, to pay taxes to Caesar. Okay, I think that's what they were trying to get Joshua to say. Is that in other words, to pay taxes to Caesar is tantamount to worshiping him. Okay, uh, but of course Joshua did not take the bait. He knew that they were trying to catch, trying to get him into trouble. So in verse 24, Joshua said, "Show me a denarius," which is a Roman coin. And he asked the people, the crowd, whose image and inscription does it have? And they answered and said, Caesar's. And Joshua said to them, therefore render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. Okay? So, in other words, Joshua was saying, by all means, pay your taxes. Okay? Because that's an earthly affair. What does that have to do with God? Okay? Paying taxes is an earthly affair. What does that have to do with God? But when we look at the government's exemption for churches, do you think the government is being kind? Like, since when does the United States government support Christianity or Bible? I don't mean to use that term, but Bible believers. Especially, like, you can see it today with the fake, whatever, in my opinion, fake virus and all that. Look at how the government is treating Bible believers. The government does not care about us, so why would they give an exemption to so-called churches? I want to be clear, these are not God's churches at all. These churches do not represent the God of the Bible. Okay, they do not. Just any more than the Pharisees represented I am when Joshua was there. Joshua told the Pharisees that their father was the devil. Okay, he said your father is the devil. And yet, those people were running the temples of their day, right? Claiming, carrying this Bible and claiming to be representatives of the Creator. And so in the same way, today, we see churches on every corner who claim to represent the God of the Bible, but they do not. They're just like the Pharisees in the past. All of, like I said in another video, literally, I'm not exaggerating by any means. Literally, and I will, teach you over time whatever about these things in case you don't know. But literally 100% of what these churches preach is false, and so that makes sharing the gospel very difficult in the world, just like it was in Joshua's day, because everybody hears what the Christians teach. Everybody knows what the churches teach, but the churches are teaching false. Everything they're saying is false doctrine. And so it makes preaching the true gospel very, very difficult. The government is not being kind to give these so-called churches this exemption. Okay, there are strings attached to those exemptions, and for example, let's look at right now what's happening with this vaccine, with this COVID thing, right? The government closed the churches. Okay, by what authority did the government close the churches? You know what their authority is? The 501c3 designation. That's their authority. This is one of the strings attached to the 501c3 is that whatever the government's public policy is, the 501c3 church has to abide by the government's public policy. Do you see that's one of the big strings attached? And so if you don't abide, if the government introduces a public policy due to a pandemic that says you have to be closed, then guess what? Because you're a 501c3, you must be closed. Otherwise, you are violating your 501c3 tax exemption. And the funny thing about these tax exemptions is, the real danger, once you get that exemption, the teeth that the government has you, that holds you by, is that if you ever were to lose that exemption, it's what's that word there? Where it's carried back. I forget what they call that. Retroactive. Okay, so in other words, if you do something to violate your 501c3 status, for example, staying open during a pandemic when the government tells you to shut down, you're now in violation of your tax exemption. And when you lose that tax exemption, they make that retroactive, meaning if you've been tax exempt for 15 years, then you have to cough up the taxes for 15 years of income and property taxes that you didn't pay. So that's the real teeth that the government can, once they got you, they got you. Because that's a lot of money, and there's no church that can come up with that money. Okay? And now, so this is a no-brainer. Why, as a Bible believer, why would I shackle myself with the government? Why would I volunteer to have a relationship with the government of any kind? Joshua, again, I'm sort of taking him out of context because this is not really what he's talking about, but didn't he just say pay your taxes? Give to Caesar what he don't have any more relationship with Caesar. Don't try to get special treatment because there's going to be strings attached. If there's taxes, then just pay your taxes. Okay? And as a Bible believer, I'm not supposed to be worshiping money. So why would I care? Everybody else pays taxes, why shouldn't I? If I have a business, if I have a car repair shop, I pay my taxes. It's just a no-brainer. Everybody just files their taxes and pays their taxes. If I operate a church, why shouldn't I do the same? Why shouldn't I just pay my taxes and be done with it and not have any more relationship with the government than I have to? Okay? And if I'm not worshiping money, then why should I care to part with this tax just like everybody else does? Do you understand? Especially when people are donating the money. I'm not even really doing anything for the money. People just make donations. Why shouldn't I happily, they donated the money to me, why shouldn't I happily turn around and pay a certain percentage to the government? What's the big deal? It's not like the poor guy that had to crawl under the car and fix the car and sweat and cut his hands and hurt himself on the car to produce that dollar. You did nothing. somebody just gave you $1, why shouldn't you give the government their share? Just so you don't have to have a partnership with the government. Do you see what I'm saying? And uh, so that you don't have any strings attached. Um, and the same thing goes, a lot of people will say, well, the people coming to church, they want tax deduction for their contributions. Why? Again, if they're not, as Bible believers, we're not supposed to be worshiping money. So why should they care whether their contribution is tax deductible or not? You understand? Why should that be a deal breaker for them? So you're telling me that a true Bible believer should determine which church he goes to based on which one he gets a tax deduction from? So if he were to, again, let me be clear that in my opinion, 99.9% of churches out there are false. They're just as false as Islamic churches, as Buddhist, let's just call churches. I know they're called temples, but Buddhism, Hinduism, you name it. 99% of these so-called Christian churches are false. So I want to be clear about that. But my point is, as a Bible believer, you mean you're not supposed to be worshiping money. So why would you be so concerned with whether my contributions are going to get me a tax deduction? So if I ask this church, if I make a donation and oh my gosh, to my surprise, he's not a 501c3. Oh my gosh, all that money we donated this year, we don't get a tax deduction? We need to find another church. Does that sound right? Okay, does that sound like a true Bible believer? Okay, so again, it just doesn't make any sense that as believers we would be so concerned as to whether we get a tax deduction for our contributions. It doesn't make sense. So that's all I want to say. I don't want to carry on anymore. You get the idea. And so that's the hidden meaning behind the 501c3, the IRS code, the exemption that churches get. Okay? So bye for now, and may I am bless you. Bye-bye.